It's November the 8th, 2016, and today's the day that Americans have to make a decision and the whole world is watching.
Yes, that decision will be, what will our next Patreon stretch goal be at the Level 1 Tech's Patreon?
Before we get into our first story of this week, it's kind of a security-heavy thing this week, but we've also got some news about gaming and some interesting things about AI. We'll first address some stuff that we said last week that we might not have gotten exactly correct.
There were some inaccuracies in last week's, and we feel on the internet it's extremely important to own up to your mistakes and explain them. So you had a little bit of confusion about the Jim Crow laws.
Yeah, so it turns out that I thought that Jim Crow laws were passed. No, that's not actually correct. Jim Crow laws are laws that enforce segregation and stuff like that. So many things make so much more sense now. I thought that I wasn't even considering that was a thing that could pass in law.
So you took that I Heart Jim Crow off of that bumper sticker off your car, right?
We had to completely scrap that entire product line.
I made a mistake about the Russian nuke. I said it was 10-ton warhead. It's 100 tons. So sleep tight. Also, and these weren't mistakes, but a lot of people wrote in, and it seems like the art community really loves the Studio Puck.
Great. You can buy one right now. There you go. It turns out this is not a new technology. In fact, this one is probably more functional than the Microsoft one. It's a puck that lets you move in 3 dimensions. So in addition to rotation and, that you get with the regular Microsoft puck, this is designed for 3-dimensional input. Now, this is not the only one. There's actually a bunch of these in different configuration, different varieties. There's even a version where you can take your mouse in the air and move that around, but that's not very puck-like. So it didn't work before. If it works now, the only reason it's going to work is because Microsoft dumped a bunch of money into the software to make the software actually not terrible.
I still don't understand it, but I'm not artistic, so hey, maybe we're wrong about this one.
Time will tell, but unless the software is really got amazing support for the puck, I think it'll be a gimmick.
Another thing we got a lot of feedback about was the negative interest rates. Now, we said it didn't affect depositors, but we heard from a lot of people in the EU, and apparently right around the time that negative interest rates came about, some mysterious fees started popping up every month in everybody's accounts.
Yeah.
So seems like they are being affected by that, but it's in sort of a misdirected way.
It's hidden fees or whatever. It was really interesting, some of the people that had written in and how their banks were trying to pass those negative interest rates onto them, but not as a negative interest rate, just as a fee for doing banking.
And we got a lot of feedback from that, which is great. We love feedback. But it was kind of disappointing how much of it was that Keynesian Kool-Aid drinking. This is good. No, this stimulates the economy. It forces banks to loan. Well, I'll just remind you that in 2008, the global economy almost collapsed because banks made bad loans. So we should put a gun to their head and say, make more loans? I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that.
And also the article was talking about how they were building these elaborate cash storage rooms. So that doesn't seem like that's working.
Well, that's to get around it because they don't want to pay the fee. It's an interesting policy. It's never been done before in history. So time will tell, I suppose. But I don't think it's a good idea.
On to the news for this week. The first thing that we were going to talk about is capital controls in China for Bitcoin.
This goes back to last week as well, actually, because we talked about how capital controls in China were fueling Bitcoin going up. And then every time China did more capital controls, Bitcoin really benefited from that. So this week, they introduced more capital controls, but this time on Bitcoin. So
we called it.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's popular, I guess it was the article attributes this to the price surge of Bitcoin attracting the attention of Chinese authorities.
Chinese investors, and I hope this isn't racist to say, but they tend to be momentum chasers. Back during the summer, you had that it was like the street vendors had laptops while they were vending on the street with their stock portfolio. They were trading. Everybody was trading in China. And there was a huge bubble, and it has since burst, and really bad things happened. But yeah, the Chinese traders, they love a good bubble to jump into. So maybe they're trying to protect them from themselves, but it seems like they're trying to keep money from going out of the country.
Yeah, it's all about preventing money from leaving China. I think there were some official quotes from like the Chinese finance minister or something, and the language was literally, we've got to make sure that not too much currency leaves China however we can.
Yeah.
Well, the other big decision that's got to be made this Tuesday is the election, I guess, the American election. We're not going to talk about that. My God, what a mess. But the U.S. government has said that it's ready in case Russia decides to attack.
This is it definitely harkens back to the Cold War. This is mutually assured destruction in cyber form. It's like, hey, you mess with our election, we're going to turn your power off.
It would be a neat trick if somebody managed to permanently destroy Hillary's email.
I don't think even the Russians are that powerful. But it is the other interesting thing about this is how they're telegraphing it. They're telling everybody, hey, we're going to do this. And cyber warfare, it doesn't seem like that's the way to go about that. So I think it's just saber rattling, but
it's probably that giant nuclear weapon from last week.
Yeah, well, it's basically the same policy. If you do this, we'll do this, and that's supposed to keep everybody under control.
Electronic scorched earth. That's probably not good. That's probably bad.
Scorched transistors.
Scorched transistors. Oh, we're already off the rails. Privacy, there was a lot of privacy news this week. Glenn Greenwald, he's the guy that, originally published a lot of stuff from Snowden. He had a new article this week that was about the three major failures of surveillance that have been revealed this week. And it comes from Canada. Canada behaving badly. How often do we get to report that?
Not very often, although I'm sure that while they were spying, they were insanely polite about it.
Oh, those polite Canadians. It's like, oh, I'm sorry. I have to rifle through all this. Sorry.
Every email that the guy read while I was going through it, he just quietly said, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's not good. So this article is about the three big failures. UK security agencies unlawfully collected data for 17 years. There were similar failures in Canada. And also spying on a journalist, trying to find the journalist's source within the police. So in a nutshell, there was a journalist that was talking to someone inside the police force that was reporting on wrongdoing or potential wrongdoing, alleged wrongdoing inside the police force. And so the police force used all of their surveillance might to spy on the journalist. And what came out of that is not that they were just spying on that journalist, that they'd actually done it 7 times, 8 times, something like that.
Yeah, and what makes this even more deliciously Canadian is it was the Mounties. So you can imagine the Mounties, going after. But yeah, this was a guy who wasn't breaking any laws. He was simply reporting on police misconduct. Now, of course, I guess in their mind, the person leaking it was breaking a law. But to surveil a journalist to try to find someone, that's a degree of separation. You can't do that.
Well, I always have to be really careful with the terminology there because, if there is an employment agreement in place with the Mounties, is it really breaking the law or is it just breach of contract? Because
that's a good question.
Anymore, like when we hear about the recording industry going after crazy people, we didn't have a story on it, but the recording industry is going after Cloudflare, which is a proxy service because Cloudflare enables pirates because it makes it harder to figure out where the web server is. But, this is really, breach of contract or, lower level breach of copyright versus like criminal activity, felonies and that sort of thing.
Now, I'm not familiar with Canada's freedom of the press laws, but they're pretty much like ours, right?
Yeah, one would think, yeah.
So I don't think any way you can paint that as the journalist having done something wrong.
No, it was bigger news that this had been done not once. It's like, oh yeah, one time it got heated. We accidentally used our tools. Should we not have done that? It's like, oh, this is a pattern of behavior. And when something enters pattern of behavior territory, it becomes easier and easier and easier. Just like there was a neurological study that's, it's like when you start telling small lies, something in the hippocampus gets okay with that, and then you can tell larger and larger and larger lies. And so it's like that with the spying. It's like, oh, it's okay, we can spy this one time, and then all of a sudden you're spying on all the journalists. And then before too long, it's like it's in China where we'll get to the Chinese story on journalism in a minute.
So you're saying just like a lying muscle, you have a spying muscle.
Yep. Wow. And at this point, we're really roided out.
Yeah, the Mounties they're on that testosterone.
They're juicing. Can we come up with another term other than juicing? I mean, juicing might work if you're referring to electricity, but I don't think that's readily apparent.
For spying, I don't know. I Can't think of a good one.
You're surrepting? No, that doesn't work.
That doesn't simplify.
We're right off the... okay. Well, speaking of agencies behaving badly, this actually isn't really terrible.
No, let's have some more of this. This isn't bad.
So it's weird, though, isn't it? The FBI Twitter bot, the FBI Twitter bot came to life mysteriously at 4 o'clock in the morning and started tweeting like crazy.
Now, this was an account that hadn't been used, I think, in a year.
Yeah.
But what they did was perfectly okay. These were freedom of information records that
were tweeted.
Should be, the public has full access to this, but they were very pro-Trump, anti-Clinton. It seemed like these were, cultivated to...
The timing seems odd.
Yeah, so... and now they're investigating. They're doing an internal investigation. So it really seems like somebody in the FBI is not happy about Clinton skating on those charges. And there's a little bit of mutiny maybe going on.
Mutiny in the FBI office, say it ain't so. It hasn't been this good since the Hoover days.
Yeah, but I'll take it. I think these guys are fighting the good fight.
I also want to point out, it's not really so much, you can tell that the journalist that wrote this is not really like super familiar with technology, because what happened is not really that the Twitter bot went crazy. If the FBI had a bot hooked up to their quote unquote public records room. And so their public records room is just a website that has, FOIA requests on it. And whenever they publish a FOIA request, the Twitter bot automatically looks at that and says, oh, there's a new thing here. I'm going to go ahead and tweet it. So probably somebody dumped a bunch of documents to the public records room, hoping nobody would notice. But there was a Twitter bot hooked up to it, and the Twitter bot was like, oh, let me just go ahead and dump all this. And so it attracted a bunch of attention, because a lot of the first tweets that it tweeted were pretty innocuous. And then the last few tweets were like, oh, the William J. Clinton Foundation initial release consists of, all of this stuff relating to this particular investigation. And since that tweet, the account has not been active.
But it shows you, if that's an automated process, it had been a year since they had done any freedom of information releases. They're sandbagging everything. And then somebody was like, hey, wait a minute. I can just release some of these and steer the public.
It was probably nothing more than some really passive-aggressive thing. It's like, Comey put in the call in the field office, and it was like, no, you're off that case. You're not going to do anything, And it's like, well, I guess I can get to the backlog of FOIA requests now.
Yeah.
And then it tweeted.
So I'm sure that won't happen anymore. There don't have to be like 5 different bureaucrats that have to look at something before it gets tweeted.
Oh, has anybody won the election yet? Because probably most of you are watching this after the election, probably after the apocalypse. This might be the last thing that we did with the little bit of electricity that we've got left before the apocalypse.
Yeah, this might be the last thing you see before the riots, which is cool. You can tell your kids about it if they survive.
Another big story this week is the Android spyware that's targeting business executives. Now, the deal with this is that you've got to install it. It's got to be installed with physical access to your phone. But this is one of the best rootkits yet for Android phones. Basically, complete control of the phone, and it can be spied on remotely, and it's fairly hard to detect.
Yeah, and literally everything. It's access to everything. And you've got to imagine that the guys that are on the level that they're being attacked by this, because this is like upper echelon, these guys are going to have no clue. They're just going to keep going as business as usual. They're never going to know that they've got this thing.
We don't really know what sort of tools law enforcement uses. It's possible that it's related to law enforcement, but looking at how the tool works, I kind of doubt it. Unless it was another one of those deals where the FBI hired somebody, from a foreign country to do it, because they color a little bit more outside the lines. I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that they take a more creative approach. And this malware seems fairly well packaged for what it is.
And I don't know why they would think that whoever created that wouldn't just fork it and sell it to the highest bidder. I mean... Yeah.
The ISIS Android phone spy package. It's going to happen.
Yeah. Now, of course, you kind of have to assume that you're being spied on to some extent these days. And it's funny because the most powerful men in the world, Reuters has a story about this, they don't use electronic communication, like literally.
No, not at all. It turns out that they have their secretaries actually print email. Warren Buffett is included in this list. And it's literally just a purely electronic isolation. It's purely a situation where there's no there's just no access to the executive electronically. Their secretary handles it. Their secretary filters stuff, and replies to email consist of yes, no, or thank you. And so there was one case where one of the executives was sort of caught red-handed, and they went through his emails, and the most incriminating thing they found in his email was "I approve." And so it's like, okay, well, how deeply involved were you? It's like, oh yeah, we should pour radioactive waste on those children. I approve. It's like, well, did you orchestrate the plan? Did you just not pay attention to your email and say I approve? There's a lot of, one is intent and one is ambivalence, and it's very hard to prove your case.
There's a lot of this in great fiction, like the Mafia Don and Goodfellas wouldn't touch phones. The guy from The Wire, the drug dealer, wouldn't touch phones. Now, I don't want to say that Jamie Dimon and Lloyd Blankfein are criminals. Oh yeah, I do want to say that. They're definitely criminals.
Oh, God. Moving right along. Speaking of uninvited visitors in your house, did you know that your phone is picking up ultrasonic signals that you didn't know about, and they're tracking you?
This is really this is beyond Orwell. I don't think he was that creative. This kind of thing. It's crazy.
I was talking to Brian Lunduke. We're working on a thing maybe, and we were talking about this ultrasonic stuff. So the way this works is the microphone in your phone and your computer is capable of picking up sounds that the human ear cannot hear. And the speakers in televisions and computers and stuff like that are capable of emitting sounds that the human ear cannot hear. So how when you hold your phone up, like it's like, oh, that song sounds amazing. I don't know this personally. I'm not really into music, but it's like, oh, this song sounds amazing. I got to figure out what it is. And you run the app and you hold your phone up and your phone listens to whatever it is. And then the phone is like, oh, that's this song. Well, it works the same way, except it's ultrasonic. So the phone hears something you can't hear. Your computer hears something you can't hear. Now, your computer has to ask you when you want to use the microphone. At least Chrome does. But on your phone, when you install an application, it's like, oh, can I have microphone access? And like in the case of the Facebook app, that makes sense. Maybe you're going to make a video call or something like that in the Facebook app. But what they don't tell you is that the application can be listening all the time. And the ultrasonic signals is how the phone would receive a signal, say, from your television. So if you're watching a Jeep commercial or something on TV, if your phone hears that ultrasonic signal, your phone will know that you saw a Jeep commercial.
And the really disturbing thing about it is your phone doesn't have a mode that says only listen in ultrasonic mode. It's listening to everything to pick these up.
Yep.
So, if you have an app that has microphone access, you just have to assume that your microphone's listening to everything that you do.
Yeah. If you can, just use the web versions of those instead of the app versions, because at least for now, the web versions can't be running sort of surreptitiously in the background. This article talks about some fixes that exist, or some proposed fixes that exist, to make the clarification, to make the distinction between microphone access only when the application is open and microphone access all the time. That should help mitigate it. The FTC is aware of this, and the FTC has the article, I think the exact words that it used were wrapped the knuckles of developers that had done this. And so there's no real punishment. There's no litigation or anything like that. But it's just hey, maybe we shouldn't do this. And that's an example of the laws not being in place to catch up with this. In the EU, honestly, this is probably illegal in the EU. But in America, they're aware of it. They haven't passed legislation to deal with it. It's technically not illegal, but it's scary.
And there's little to no benefit to the end user. There's no reason you'd ever want this. This only benefits data mining and tracking and advertising. So, we don't need this.
Yeah, in populous areas, there are apparently even outdoor billboards that are continuously emitting this ultrasonic signal. And then if you happen to walk by, even if the phone's in your pocket, if it can hear it loud enough, it's like, oh, you're walking by this, no GPS, no whatever, and the application will still know where you are.
Are these within dog range?
Maybe.
We should start breeding dogs that detect these signals.
I'm surprised there doesn't exist an Android app that will let you run this and will decode the ultrasonic signals around you. Think of it like a tricorder application for decoding this. Cool. Anybody want to do that app? Let's start a GitHub. Let's brand it Level 1. Let's spread the word. That could be one of our side projects. But if you wanted to start that project on the forum, I don't think it will be a hard project to do. Probably about 40 lines of code.
the Mirai botnet is back. It's changed its target, and I don't understand why. They've attacked Liberia.
Yes. So the Internet of Things is alive, and it's rooted more devices than ever, and it's attacking Liberia.
And Liberia has a single point of failure in their incoming fiber. So everything. They took down everything. And maybe this was just to see if they could. The answer is yes. And poor Liberia was without internet for a fairly extended period of time.
Maybe this was their ISP. Their ISP's like, no, you need multiple connections. Oh, you don't need multiple connections
False
at all.
False flag ISP. That would be brilliant. How do you hire these guys, though?
It's probably just one savant working for the ISP and was like, okay, I'll make the sale. It's just, what?
And this one had more gigabits per second in this attack. So the botnet has grown.
Yes.
It hasn't gotten any better. Even with the recall that the Chinese camera manufacturer did, Mirai is getting stronger.
Yeah, well, I can tell you why. It's because the guy that installed those IP cameras has no idea. Like, the vendor probably called him and was like, oh, we got a recall on those cameras. And it's like, well, the cameras are working, so I don't care.
I'm not running that cable. I'm not getting a ladder out to fix your problem. Don't call me again.
Yeah, somebody needs to write a hot patch. This is where the NSA would be handy. Put all those people to use and dismantle the botnet and patch the problem from the inside. Yeah, it's not a perfect solution. Yeah, that means you're going to be running code developed by the NSA, but it's probably better than...
But they're going to put a hook in that where it just routes everything to them. It's like, oh, yeah. Just route that hose into one of our data centers. That's perfect. And then they're watching everybody's IP cameras.
Okay, China. This is the Chinese story that we mentioned earlier. China is formalizing regulations for live streaming.
Live streaming in China, it's huge, and it's not just game streaming and the kinds of things that we do here. They live stream a lot of things, and things that you might not expect.
So the new regulations are that everything that's live streamed and everything the users say has to be maintained by the provider for 60 days. And what's happening is that there's a ton of providers of streaming services in China, outside of China, because of the Great Firewall of China. It's a little bit more problematic in terms of, making sure that there's enough bandwidth to do that. So these providers spring up inside China, which is what Chinese authorities want. And so the larger providers are in a position to cooperate with Chinese authorities. And in exchange for their cooperation, the Chinese authorities will be harder on the smaller providers. And so what's happening is a conglomeration and a concentration. And so if China ends up with, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 streaming providers instead of hundreds, then the state will be in a better position to control it and regulate it, which is what they want, because there are too many streaming providers now to effectively regulate it. It's sort of gotten out of control. And what sparked all this, I shit you not, is streaming girls in China streaming eating bananas.
Yeah, that's huge there. But they're controlling a lot of things. To what you wear while you're streaming is controlled, and what you talk about is also very controlled. And a lot of that has to do with, China's got a very powerful state propaganda machine, and they don't want, as popular as live streaming is becoming, they don't want anybody to be able to bypass that and report unregulated news through streaming services.
Oh yeah, recent changes in the news are that you can't have an unsighted source. You cannot be the source of news anymore that is an original source. You have to cite your source.
And it has to be the government.
Pretty much, yeah. So as of right now, there are 588 licenses. You have to get a stream license, like a streaming license. I wonder if I could get a license that would permit me to eat M&Ms on stream, or if that's also banned.
I don't know. Plain M&Ms is probably okay, but if you get into the crazy flavors, I think you might be over the line.
Well, I wouldn't mind being banned from eating the pecan pie M&Ms.
Yeah, I remember you hated those. I didn't try them.
Bad.
Your description put me. I don't even want a part of that.
But plain M&Ms, oh my god, so amazing. So Turkey, Facebook, and WhatsApp are sort of blocked in Turkey. Facebook, Twitter, and WhatsApp.
Yeah, this is a byproduct of Turkey jailed some more opposition politicians. So the Kurds are always in opposition with the Turkish leadership. And so every once in a while, they'll just round them up and put them in jail. And as you can imagine, social media, the state media, just like China, they don't touch it. It's, this was good. These people are terrible. But
those people are terrorists.
Yeah. So in order to keep control of the narrative, they shut down all their social media. And that's not the first time they've done this.
Doesn't this guy look like a villain? I mean, it's just...
He does. Yeah, they had the trial because a journalist compared him to Gollum from Lord of the Rings, the way he looked. And they put him on. I don't know how that wrapped up, but he had to go to court to prove that he wasn't.
Was it a foreign journalist?
No, I think it was a Turkish guy.
Wow. It's like, oh, this guy looks like Gollum. It's like,
he does.
That's interesting.
He looks like Gollum. I mean, objectively.
Oh, I'm sorry, Turkey. Very, very sorry. Face recognition also took a hit this week in security. So if you wear these special glasses, these funky looking glasses, face recognition software basically breaks and it will misrecognize you. So the face on top with the glasses, and then you end up getting recognized as the face on the bottom.
Yeah, this really, I mean, face recognition seems amazing, especially how accurate it can be. But this strips down and shows how tiny the parts of your face they're looking at are and how easy it is to get around.
When you know the algorithm and you can attack the algorithm, it turns out all you need is a fancy pair of glasses.
Yeah, it's like the bridge of the nose and the surrounding the eyes, pretty much what you're looking at there.
Yep.
And if you can just simulate that, you can beat it.
My Windows hello, no!
And what's amazing is, a lot of these new apps have pay with selfie.
Yeah.
They were real proud of themselves. It's like, oh, this is going to be an amazing marketing gimmick. This beats that completely.
There are a lot of banking applications, too, that incorporate, when you're doing certain functions in the banking application, it takes your picture surreptitiously. If you read the terms of service, it's like, we're going to turn your camera on and take a picture of you when you're doing stuff.
Yeah, anytime you trade stocks, but just in case you show up and you're like, hey, I didn't make this trade, I want it undone. And they'll come out and be like, well, here's a picture of you doing it. So be aware of that.
But you didn't know that. Yeah, it turns out. It's like you use those check depositing applications where you take a picture of the check and deposit it. Same deal. Takes your picture. You didn't even know. You didn't read the terms of service, did you? You never do. It's okay. That's why you got us.
Think about all that time that you've been doing banking on the toilet. Yeah, they've got pictures of that.
That's a mental picture I did not need. So randomly, there's there have been some interesting articles this week in terms of like machine learning and artificial intelligence and language processing. A lot of it comes from Google related technologies. There's a really good video from July 2016 on TensorFlow and deep learning. We had some questions about it on the forum, and we had some questions about language processing. And so I wanted to show you guys this video on TensorFlow and deep learning without a PhD from Martin Gorner at Google. This is a really great it's an hour long, so it's a lecture. We're not really going to get into it, but TensorFlow is an open source library that you can use for machine learning right now today. There are wrappers for it that are available for a whole bunch of different languages. You can get started with Python with it really quickly. You can do a 100-line, image classification, image recognition program really quickly. By the time you get through the lecture, honestly, you've got a handwriting classification system in Python if you want, starting from an alphabet, which is really, really mind-blowing. And there's another article sort of to offset that. Well, not really to offset that, but that's kind of related called Is Deep Learning the New 42? The answer to life, the universe, and everything. And so this is an hour and 46 minutes. And this is also worth a look if you're into that kind of thing. Really, the view counts on this are pretty low. I feel like the interest rate in our audience is pretty high for this subject matter. This bleeding edge technology is gonna, change the future. It's gonna change everything. It's not like the old, Marvin Minsky AI. Well, it is a little bit, but it's not like the old Marvin Minsky AI. But it's what power a lot of Google services. It's what power a lot of the things that you see. Digital assistants like Siri and Alexa, it's what powers them. And the end goal of this, of course, is an interactive talking fish.
It's all this stuff that's getting stored, like the NSA and this data logging and everything. You think, well, it's not so bad, but it's going to be a short amount of time before an AI is just pouring through all of that, and they're going to get better and better at learning from it, and it's going to be insane.
It's going to be great. I'm going to get a letter in the email, or I'm going to get a letter in the mail, or an email or something from that AI, and it's like, dear Wendell, you're weird. we're keeping an eye on you now.
Well, yeah, it's going to be like the copyright notifications. Like, hey, in 2006, we know what you said about the government. We're watching.
I read some sci-fi books that doesn't end well for society. No. It's really bad. This is actually somebody hacked the big mouth Billy Bass talking fish thing with the Alexa digital assistant, and so this is an Arduino interface to Alexa, so you can talk to this. Alexa is Amazon's digital assistant, I think, and so you can ask it for the weather and all the stuff that you can do with the Alexa interface, but in talking fish on the wall form as opposed to talking cylinder form or whatever.
There's going to be a huge market, just like with GPS systems, where you have celebrity voice systems and like 3D representations like Face Rig. So, whoever, Britney Spears could be your AI companion.
Britney Spears?
That's the best one. I don't know the young pop stars these days.
I want Christopher Walken. I would love to have a Christopher Walken. It's like, what's the weather for today? And it's just, I'm not going to attempt a Christopher Walken impersonation.
He has those odd pauses in his speech. So it's like, if you needed it quickly, you get angry at your Christopher Walken. It's like, come on, spit it out, Chris.
At the fork in the road.
Yeah.
Turn left. It's like, oh, I missed the turn. Oh. Digital assistant, no. And then the last things that we've got for this week are this. This is called Turbo.js. This is a number crunching engine in JavaScript that is very, very accessible, that uses GPU acceleration to speed it up. So it does the computations on the graphics card using the graphics facilities that are available in JavaScript to actually go through an array and do the array computations. And so it's 10 times faster. So if you have an application that does like a spreadsheet or number processing or need to do a lot of matrix multiplication or whatever, instead of doing it with JavaScript, you can do it like as if it was a graphics operation on the GPU. Transparently, the library handles all of it, and it's 10 times faster. This is really clever, and because it's so clever, I thought it deserved a plug.
Yeah, there's a lot that you can do with that we're probably not even thinking of yet. And that's cool. It's good. That's if it turns out to be like Bitcoin. One of the great things about it is it's going to drive the video market to innovate, because when Bitcoin drove, all of a sudden everybody wanted a video card so they could mine Bitcoin. It was really good for performance.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Bitcoin, because when Bitcoin was not as insanely complicated as it is now, somebody actually did write a library for JavaScript that would cause visitors of the web page to contribute to the mining operation. So if you spent a lot of time on a website, your browser would be mining for Bitcoin in the background through JavaScript. So this would let you do it with a GPU 10 times faster. I wonder if anybody's going to update that library. It might be an interesting way to do microtransactions, honestly.
If you hear your fan gear up when you go to a website, maybe look into the source.
It's like, oh, when I scroll, it's only 1 frame per second. Oh, it's mining Bitcoin. Oh, it's great. It's just great. And then finally, we're at the end. Can you believe it? Oh, it's just dragging on. This is either the first or second worst episode we've ever done.
It's definitely in the top 3.
The last thing that we have is Cheynobyl before the disaster. And so I thought this was really an interesting image gallery, I guess, for lack of a better word, on Imgur. And so you should take a look at it. You should follow the link and take a look at it so that Imgur can earn ad revenue or whatever. But this is the construction of the nuclear power plant and sort of what life was like in Cheynobyl before the disaster.
My favorite thing about this was apparently a lot of people didn't want to go there because it was so remote. So they only ended up with graduates. And the average age in a place with all this science was 26.
Wow.
Yeah. So I bet they had a happening club scene in Cheynobyl. I bet it was hot.
It went nuclear. The fallout was to die for, though.
Mm.
So big news this week from BlizzCon. I think it was BlizzCon. Blizzard is launching pro sports leagues for Overwatch.
I think we need to bring out our official Overwatch correspondent to walk us through this.
Professional Mercy main here, guys. They're doing...
How many hours you got at Mercy?
104. They're doing pro Overwatch now. So that means it's going to be just like pro sports teams. There's going to be managers. with like happy old white men managing the teams. Everyone gets paid with a contract. It's launching in 2017. It's going to be a really big deal.
There's a pic of the pro old white man.
Yeah, they're all excited about all the money they're about to make.
So it's really going to be like actual real pro sports teams.
Yes.
Yeah.
Huh.
And it's going to be all like regional too. So like you have like different cities with different names.
Oh, so that means we'll get the Nashville no-scopes?
Yes.
I wonder if I could get in early on the Boston Teabaggers.
Oh, that we don't want to get in on.
That's the one you want.
I think Steve Ballmer owns the LA Clippers, doesn't he? Somebody needs to call him and tell him to sell. He needs to get the Boston Teabaggers immediately.
I think he'd make more money. Yeah.
I definitely think he would make more money.
Now, are these going to be in arenas? Are we going to play this in sports arenas?
Well, it's how StarCraft is done in Korea.
Yeah, it'd be like a giant like warehouse.
So what do you think
thing.
the tickets are going to cost?
A lot of money so that they can afford all the contracts so they can pay all the rich old white men.
Wow.
That's likely.
That'll be interesting.
Rich old white men running sports, esports even. I mean, I guess it kind of makes sense with Ballmer and some of the other stuff, but it really doesn't make any sense for sports in general, I guess, either.
Do you think we'll start to see like young kids running around with jerseys with Korean written
Korean
across
names.
their shoulders?
Hangul.
It's like, oh, I'm wearing this, star Bastion player Mercy, or
Stare 2.
I can't. There's so much comedy gold there. I have no idea. Well, we're
Pro
completely
ninjas.
off the rails, so that must mean it's the end of the show.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So we're going to see you guys next week.
Bye.
See ya.
Thanks for all the support. More stuff is planned. See ya.
Okay, it's actually bye now. Bye.